What is going on, everyone? Wanted to hop on here to tell you guys about two stories that I'm sure you have not heard of yet. So, before we begin, please let me know where you are tuning in from, city and state. Always love to know where everyone is joining in from. Okay, so, and if you're tuning in from, of course, outside this great nation, let me know where you're tuning in from. Country, region, province. Okay, so here we go. These are two stories that I'm sure you haven't heard much about. Most of you have probably not heard about either of these stories. The first story comes to us from Washington, D.C. There was a impromptu concert, apparently, in the middle of the street in Washington, D.C. for and now, here's one of the things that is very interesting about this story. Many media outlets called this a concert. However, the truth is, now that I've spoken to officers in DC and other sources, this was not a concert at all. This was someone pulling a truck onto a sidewalk and starting to play music out of it. That's what I'm told. That's what this was. It was not a concert, actually. It was what was reported as a concert was actually a truck on the side of the street. Okay, so it was a little bizarre that it was described as that. Okay, so put that aside. Apparently, this was not a concert. It was a truck on the side of the road playing music, or maybe people performing inside the truck, and a large crowd gathered. Okay, and the large crowd was, someone called the police. The police arrived, and there were obviously people dispersing. In the melee, people were trampled and people were injured. However, things really went south when someone started firing a gun. Now, this is what they called was a Juneteenth concert celebration, which it was not. It was just a bunch of people gathering to listen to this music coming out of a truck that was parked on the sidewalk or on the side of the street. So it was very, very bizarre. This was something that turned into a melee, and it ultimately led to a 15-year-old young man getting shot and killed. Two other people were shot, two adults, and a police officer was shot. All the adults, the two adults and the police officer who were shot, were transported to the hospital, and they were in stable condition. Unfortunately, the young man, 15 years old, passed away. One of the adults, not the police officer, of course, one of the two adults that were shot, reports are they were both black gentlemen. One of them had a firearm on him. Okay, so what was very odd about this is that it happened in D.C., where, as you may or may not know, the gun laws are, to call the gun laws in D.C. strict would be the understatement of the century. That said, you have now multiple people at a gathering that just popped up on the side of the street carrying illegal concealed firearms. You might ask, how is this possible? Because firearms are illegal in DC, especially concealed carry. So how did this happen? That's a great question. If anyone has an answer to that question, please comment below, because I would love to know how this happened in a city with such strict gun laws. How were there numerous people at a makeshift gathering carrying illegal firearms concealed? How is that possible? The next question is, what gun laws, if you can think of one, would have prevented these gentlemen from having illegal firearms on them at this event? Because because the laws that were currently in place did not prevent them from having these illegal firearms on them. So can you think of new laws, additional laws, that would have made them say, oh, well, with these new laws, now I was going to, but now I'm not going to bring a firearm to this event. If you could think of one, let me know. Or if you think of 2 or 5 or 10, let me know. Because I would like to know, and there's a lot of people that would like to know. Okay, so unfortunately, a young man, 15, lost his life, and there just hasn't been a lot of news about it. Not sure why that there was a event like this for Juneteenth in Washington, D.C., our nation's capital. Now, the chief of police and the mayor have, chimed in, and they said that this is something that, is, terrible and a, tragedy. Of course, it's a tragedy. It's terrible. A 15-year-old young man lost his life. And of course, the people that they were there, they were interviewed. They're like, this is crazy. This is out of control. The violence, the crime, the guns, how violence and gun violence and crime is out of control in Washington, D.C. when there are so many gun laws and so many restrictions against firearms in D.C. I don't know how, and now they're interviewing black people who are saying that the guns are out of control, the crime is out of control in Washington, D.C., the nation's capital. And if you don't know, murder in D.C. has already surpassed the murders for this time last year. So, and that's pretty much across the board in all of these cities that all share the same characteristics. If you know what I'm talking about, if you know what all these cities where murder is going through the roof, if you know what they all have in common, please comment below. I'd like to know. So, the police chief, the mayor, but it's funny that a lot of the handful of local media outlets that covered this story, it didn't really get national news, of course, we're talking about how many mass shootings there have been since the beginning of the year. Now, for those of you wondering, what is now defined as a mass shooting? There are some reports that there have been 277 mass shootings since the beginning of this year. And of course, we all know about what just recently happened in Uvalde, Texas. We all know about the supermarket shooting in Buffalo, New York. Now, let me ask you this. They're saying there's 277 mass shootings since the beginning of the year. Obviously, that's more than the number of days there have been this year thus far. Very concerning when you hear that number. However, the new definition of mass shooting is defined as an incident in which 4 or more people are shot. So, this incident at the Juneteenth celebration, where the 15-year-old was killed, 2 men were shot, and the police officer was shot, that's 4. So this counts as a mass shooting. And it goes in the books as a mass shooting. However, you also have to realize that incidents where 4 people get shot happen, and this is coming from people who work in these cities, happens in Baltimore, Chicago, LA, DC, and a handful of other cities that all have the same thing in common. Let's comment below, see what you think. All these cities across the country all have, from speaking to the law enforcement in these cities, they lose count of how many incidents they have every weekend where 4 or more people are shot. So those go to the statistic of mass shooting. Now, you don't hear about these because they're not what we classically know as a mass shooting. You don't hear about it on the news. There's not hashtags. There's not, celebrities and, politicians jumping up to get their attention and all that stuff. You don't see that because they're really not what they want to talk about. If the news and the national media, every time 4 or more people were shot in Chicago or Baltimore or LA, if they reported that as a mass shooting, they would just be 24/7 covering mass shootings. It would be nonstop. So that's why they don't. The other reason is they wouldn't want you to know what's truly happening on a regular basis in these cities that really, I mean, it's every day. It's common. These people are become numb to it. The law enforcement has surely become numb to it, but the residents have also become numb to it. So, troubling to say that, but that's the reality of it. Now, on the note of mass shootings, a lot of people have been talking about things like, mental health and things like that. Now, what some people have brought up is the gun laws and, how are these people getting the guns in their hand, whatever. Some people on one side are also talking about, well, how are these people who have criminal records being released and then going and committing crimes again? Well, this story, I'm almost positive you have not heard of. In Washington State, a 15-year-old Washington State boy, who allegedly opened fire outside of high school Monday, was released on bail less than 24 hours after his arrest, leaving a county sheriff, quote-unquote, discouraged. So, long and short of it is, a 15-year-old boy in Washington State fired a gun at or near his high school, and the police responded. They placed him under arrest. And I'll read it verbatim. Deputies responded around 3:10 p.m. Monday to gunfire in the parking lot of Mariner High School in Everett, in Snohomish County. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office said the teen allegedly fired multiple shots at a vehicle with 2 juveniles inside before fleeing on foot. The 2 juveniles were not injured. Investigators were able to positively identify the suspect and located him just before 6 p.m. Tuesday in the 2300 block of 119th Street Southwest, where deputies took him into custody. Now, here's where it gets interesting. The boy was taken into custody and a short time later was released on $250 cash bond. His bail was set at $2,500 bondable and paid $250 cash. So, in the wake of school shootings, in the wake of talking about mental health of teens and all this stuff, we have a 15-year-old boy that shoots with a gun at a vehicle with 2 juveniles inside right outside his high school. Okay, this is someone who could have very easily went into that school or could maybe come back to that school with said gun or other guns, because he didn't go get a background check to legally purchase his firearm, right? He's 15. So the laws that are in place that should prevent him from going and getting this weapon did not stop him. So once again, if you could tell me what laws could we put in place on the books that would stop this 15-year-old young man from getting a gun and going and shooting at 2 juveniles. Is there something that we can now add to it? Because I'm pretty sure the gun laws in Washington State are pretty strict as well. So, if you can think of 1 or 2 or 10, please comment. Now, he's released $250. So now, what I would like to know is if this young man were to return to that high school, enter that high school somehow, maybe a teacher leaves a door open on the side of the school, and goes in and goes to try to shoot the 2 students that he didn't quite kill, who he shot at in the car. Now he goes to the school to now take him out in the school, or maybe some other students he has a problem with, but obviously he's mentally ill. So if that happened, what would happen to the judge who released him on $250? Would anything happen? So we have these incidents that happen, and yet, on the flip side, it appears that nothing's being done to actively prevent things like this from happening again. People are talking about the mental status of the 2 men that committed the 2 shootings I talked about earlier in Texas and Buffalo. But what are we doing with these kids with guns that are shooting other kids, and then they're arrested and they're released a few hours later? As if they were caught jaywalking? Like, what would, it doesn't matter. So we all know that if he did go back to that school and shoot students, nothing would happen to the judge. I mean, nothing would happen. Nothing would happen to the prosecutor. Nothing would happen to the defendant. No, nothing would happen to anybody. We all know that. If you think something would happen, you're disconnected. You're just disconnected from reality. Nothing would happen. So no politician, no judge, no attorney, no one would be in trouble. They would just say, oh, that's the system. He just went through the system. So, on one side of the equation, you have people who are saying that the system is slanted against certain people and it is unfair and unjust. On the other side of the equation, you have a 15-year-old boy shooting in front of his high school at 2 other students and is out of jail a few hours later on $250. So which is it? That's what I'd like to know. Which is it? If you know, let me know in the comments below. It just seems a little odd. 2 stories. Both involving 15-year-old boys. Both stories not getting the national attention that I feel they should be getting. Why not? That's the question here. And is there any accountability for anyone involved in either of these situations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching. It's getting crazy out there, folks. It's getting a little crazy. And as we've said before, you are your own first responder. No one's coming to save you. So, I'll leave you with that. New gear drop on 221btactical.com. Make sure you check it out. Thanks for watching. Be safe out there. We'll see you soon.